I've got to have these formal press conferences, and I've got to give all these statistics. And she was always good about saying, hey, man, why don't you tell a story that people can relate to? Why don't you, instead of having a formal press conference, why don't you do something fun that people might actually want to watch? Right?
Did she tell you to come on this IG? Is that
absolutely. But that kind of, when I talk to younger people now, a lot of my staff, they're coming to the age where they're starting to get married, have kids, et cetera. Or they're thinking about it. They've been with somebody for a while. They're wondering, should they take the plunge? And what I always, what I say to them is, look, nothing's better than having a partner who is complementary to you, right? That sees things you don't, that has you covered on some blind spots, that can teach you something. Now that means that, there's probably going to be a little more friction, because if they're strong-minded and they've got opinions, they're not always going to mesh. And I describe in the book the fact that, Michelle and I are temperamentally different. She's got a strong personality, so do I. There are times where we're butting heads. But I am better because I've got someone who has strengths that I don't have, that sees things I don't see. And I would like to think that she feels the same way. And that, I think, has been one of the foundation stones of our relationship.
Couldn't say that any better. That complimentary piece that kind of gets you out your comfort zone. Yeah. And if you have that mutual respect and you're on the same level where you value each other's opinion, and you try to integrate that into how you're seeing things and how you react. And to your point, over the course of time, you might get confused. You don't know if it's your thoughts, her thoughts, y'all both thoughts. Like it does catch you off guard, and it's the best thing in the world. So just the way that you demonstrated that, again, through all the stresses of the highest office in the land, like that to me is one of the most amazing accomplishments, and the way that you've kind of inspired, relationships of all kinds all across, our country and the world. It means a lot. So just encouraging you guys on your journey.
Well, no,
we appreciate that.
But look, the other thing it teaches you, which becomes even more important when you've got a daughter, as a man, you've got to have confidence in seeing the strength of your wife and partner, rather than wanting them to make themselves small to pump you up. And one of the great blessings of being married to Michelle is the example she set. Now I don't have to worry that Malia and Sasha are ever going to kind of dim their light, because somehow that's supposed to be the role that they play. Because, that's just not, that's not what I want them, their lives to be. I want that light to shine, and I want them to find people in their lives that love that light and love to see that shine.
Absolutely. I'm going to bring it kind of towards, some current events in terms of, like we just went through an election. Hopefully we'll have a peaceful change of power. And I think with all that's happened over the last year, and that's kind of been exposed in the conversations that have been happening that need to continue, how would you advise us as citizens, no matter where, what walk of life you're in, to kind of continue this pursuit of social and racial justice in America? And I say that in terms of, we don't have, loud protests, every week. We don't have the news coverage as much as we might like to, but I think we all have a voice and a platform, and whether that's, through social media, whether that's through our families, our workplaces, what have you. How would you advise us, going into 2021, to continue these important conversations that we need to have, to not, lose the momentum that I think we've gained over this last year, no matter how hard, some of these things have happened?
Well, look, it's something I spend a lot of time thinking about it, and you know, I write in the book about how after my election, and I saw this coming, and I was worried about it. I think there were a lot of people who felt like, "Whoo, we're done."
Right.
You know, Barack's in office now. You know, change is here, and look, we had a big financial crisis, and we had 2 wars, and you had a big chunk of the Republican Party that were going to refuse to work with me, and you know, so no one event like an election settles things. This is democracy is this constant process, and you're never done. And so I was really, I felt so optimistic this summer after the tragedy, as heartbroken as I was, to see the response to George Floyd. I was, you know, we talked about how proud I was of how young people engaged, got involved, people from all walks of life. How proud I was of you and some of the other high-profile athletes who, you know, were very clear in their convictions and expressed them in ways that, you know, didn't leave any doubt in terms of the demands of justice, and then translated that into actually voting and, you know, really specific organizational efforts. But you're absolutely right to now say, okay, what's the next step? Well, number one, I hope people know just right away, anybody who's listening in Georgia, there's another election coming up, a special, you know, the runoff election after the Senate election. You've got 2 seats at stake in Georgia. And man, that's important because that'll determine who is in charge of the Senate. And anything that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris want to do has to go through Congress. It has to go through the Senate. And if we are able to win those 2 seats with people who want to pursue voting rights legislation or criminal justice reform legislation, that is important. So pay attention to that. Make sure you're registered and make sure you vote. The other thing that I've spoken about a lot, and you're absolutely right to say everybody can be involved in this, is so much of the change people aspire to after the George Floyd tragedy happens at the local level and not the federal level. And so the mayor of cities appoints typically the police chief. There may be an elected school board and they have meetings. There are negotiations between the police and City Hall about what does their contract look like and how are police held or not held accountable. How are the district attorneys or state's attorneys approaching cases and how do they think about diversion, for example, of nonviolent drug offenses and treatment and education as opposed to incarceration. A lot of that stuff is happening at the local level. And that's where just a pretty small number of individuals, or, you know, a group of churches or, you know, a coalition of young people can have an impact. You know, it's harder sometimes to affect what happens in Washington, but in your local community, you can actually show up at these meetings and ask questions and promote this kind of work. And one of the things that we're doing with, you know, My Brother's Keeper, which, you know, you and Aisha supported, you know, our goal, and we started after the Trayvon Martin death as a response to make sure that we're getting to some of the root causes of racism and structural injustice. You know, one of the things that a lot of these MBK communities have focused on is, you know, putting together handbooks and manuals and training programs and policy recommendations for cities. And in some cases, we've asked, one of the things that we did after the George Floyd murder was to insist on cities taking a pledge that they were going to move this process forward. And hundreds of cities have actually signed up. And so that's one way, if people are looking for ways to plug in, they can go to Obama.org, sign up to see if there's a My Brother's Keeper community in their area. If not, you can start one, but that's a place where you can immediately start getting information about concrete actions we can take to reform and improve the system.
I love the actionable items, specific concrete ways that we can participate, and how important information is. Like, that was the main effort over the pre-election season, and obviously it worked in terms of voter turnout and just a new energy around how young people can influence the outcomes of these elections.